Helen, it's nice to meet you. Thank you very much for your time. You have been doing so many speeches and meeting so many people across New Zealand. So I wondered how you're getting on and what your first impressions so far are about free speech in this country, because I know you've said many times free speech is under pressure on contentious issues. So how do you assess the state of free speech in New Zealand, particularly in relation to what you speak about, gender critical views being expressed in the likes of academia, media and policy making?
I think you've got some really serious issues here. People are under pressure not to speak at work. I've heard repeatedly from people who have been disciplined at work for stating very uncontentious, factually correct views that need to be stated in order to protect everybody's rights and well-being. So women who simply said that there are two sexes being told that that's wrong in academia, for example. You also have severe restrictions on reporting, and that's really a big worry because the way that we have the best chance of fixing this is by taking test cases to establish, or re-establish, I should say, the fact that people do have the right to freedom of speech and freedom of belief. And yet here in this country, there are severe reporting restrictions that mean that people can't understand and can't hear about the cases. And in the UK, we have found that the test cases have been the most effective way of raising awareness and of creating a head of steam for change.
Helen, where did all this come from, and why are people too scared to say facts these days? Seriously, why?
I mean, it's a huge question. Where did the idea that men can become women and women can become men come from? I mean, I wrote a book in order to largely to explain that question. There's a lot going on here. I mean, you have to point at social media, which means that contagious ideas can spread a lot faster, especially directly between children. You have to look at the lobby groups that ran out of a cause to campaign for after they won gay marriage and just moved on to the next thing. For them, that was legal gender self-ID. And you have to look at the kind of mood of the age, which is that people have the right to define themselves, that we can all say who we are, and nobody else has the right to say otherwise. So a man declares himself as a woman, and suddenly that becomes a civil rights issue, rather than just a factually false thing. And then, if you think that you can't say that, um, you're really in a bad place because you have to say it in order to protect women's single-sex spaces. So we're set up for a clash. And when one side thinks that it's righteous, thinks it's got civil rights and human rights on its side, and the other side is bigoted just for saying the truth, we have turned the issue of sound policy making and civil discussion of contentious issues into a matter of bigotry and Nazism even on one side and oppressed people and human rights on the other, which is just completely the wrong framing.
You see, what is wrong with a man who decides one day they want to be a woman? I mean, isn't it their right to do that if they want to do that? So your issue is that they can do that, but they can't go into women's spaces.
The issue is varied. People decide these things for many reasons, and women also, or girls in particular, decide that they want to be boys. Of course, they have freedom of speech and freedom of belief. They can say counterfactual things about themselves if they want. They can believe those things if they want.
Mm.
The issue is that the way society is organized in order to protect everybody's rights requires us to be honest about people's sex in quite a lot of situations. So not just single-sex spaces, but also single-sex sports, in medicine, when we're doing child safeguarding, when we are, for example, setting records for things, when we're doing positive action. If you want to give a prize for the best woman in something, you need to know who the women are. And yet these people want to be counted as the sex they want to be rather than the sex they are. So they break all of these systems. And, there isn't any sense in which a man can become a woman, except by saying so. It's just words. So when you refuse to go along with the words, that feels like meanness to that man, and you're destroying his wishes.
I see in the UK, and you've got a lot of problems in the UK at the moment, but I think there's a British magazine that's voted the top woman of the year. I think there's about 5 or 6 on a magazine, and they're all men.
Yeah, it's the cover of Glamour magazine. It's
That's the one.
nine people
Is
and
it a
4 of
British
them are
magazine?
men. I'm actually not sure. I'm not really a big reader of Glamour magazine, I have to say. It might have been in my teens.
You see,
Yeah,
this
I
all
mean, I,
feels
I
like,
regard.
is this, I mean, it all feels a bit try hard. It all feels like not all of course, but some in the media are trying hard to be different. And it seems, and look, I could be wrong, they're doing it because it seems trendy.
Yeah, it seems edgy, I think. And also, it's a sort of a way of saying up yours to the women who are trying to stand up for women's rights. It's always seemed a bit sort of, tedious, I think, to a lot of people, especially young people, that middle-aged women say boring things like, you can't do that, that's not safe. You have to think about other people. These are not messages that teens and people in their early 20s generally like to hear. It's a bit sort of pick up your socks, isn't it? We're saying if you do this, you are harming people, in particular women and children. And they're going, oh, mum, you're such a bore, and putting these people on the cover and, just showing off, really. And they specifically tweeted to J.K. Rowling, J.K. try harder next year or something like that. So it was absolutely a mum, you're such a bore sort of cover.
Helen, following the Cass review and similar reviews, including the Supreme Court hearing, or ruling rather, in the UK, do you believe, though, we're seeing a turning point in how societies approach the likes of, anything from, what is biological reality to gender affirming care?
It's a huge step in the UK for sure. It's going to make a big difference, and we're going to have to, ensure that that ruling is upheld and that the reasoning behind it rolls out across all areas, including other laws, because this is just about one law, the Equality Act, but also concerning gender medicine, as you say. I know other countries are watching closely, but it's not going to just flow out naturally. You've actually got to do the work. You've got to take the test cases. You've got to re-establish your fundamental rights. And it's not going to be easy because we're way behind the other side. They have been lobbying and pushing new laws and policies for decades now, largely behind the scenes. This only became something in public consciousness, I would say, around 2015, so 10 years ago. But they were already doing a lot of work. Like by then, lots of countries had legal gender self-ID. So there's a terribly long way still to go, and we have to do that work.
What I find interesting is there seems to be now a global movement out there where it used to be GLBT, GP,
LGBT.
Thank you. It's too early. And now they've got rid of the T that goes at the end because some, not all of course, but some are finding that the whole trans movement is a bit too, what's the word I'm looking for? It's too protesty. It's become too much of a look at me kind of thing. And I think there's some truth in that. Because why is it now that it seems to be on social media, your sexuality is put up as the most important identifying form of you? It almost seems like a form of narcissism. I mean, I couldn't care who you are as long as you're good, as long as you're a good person. But there seems to be a narcissism that goes with anything to do with identity politics. Am I wrong here?
I mean, identity politics started off with the thing that, like, some people's identities meant that they couldn't be honest about themselves. When gay men were criminalized for sexual relations, it's not like you could say at work your partner was the same sex as you. So there was a necessary correction there that people could, inverted commas, bring their whole selves to work. Like, sure. I hate that expression now, but I understand why it was said first, that you could be honest about the fact that, you're mixed race, you're with somebody of a different race, you're with someone of the same sex, that sort of thing. And now we've gone way past that to thinking of people as bundles of characteristics. And your identity is a list of things, you're neurodiverse, queer, indigenous, whatever, and these things box people in and erase all individuality and suggest that your life is not just partly shaped, but entirely shaped by those identitarian characteristics. So it's not just sexuality by any means. I mean, I agree with you. I'm not really interested in those things about people. I'm interested in whether they're good people, whether I like them, whether they're doing their job well, that sort of thing. So yes, I think there is a move away from that, but it's the way that children are taught in school now. That's the way they're taught they must think. You're meant to work out what your characteristics are. It's driving a big increase in mental unwellness as well, because you're encouraged to be things like neurodiverse or on the spectrum or whatever.
I know when it comes to work, you spoke to the platform's Leah Parnapa, who used to work for MediaWorks, and when she was hosting a talkback program, heaven forbid she made a call or something similar to along the lines of, only women can get pregnant or something like that. And anyway, as a result of that, her boss came out and said she's getting education, she's getting training. And I thought, what training? Because she said something that's biologically correct. And in fact, the boss who said this, I used to work with him, nice enough bloke, but I thought even he has gone down this really weird road of being too scared to say, well, this is a bit bullshit, isn't it? Yeah, she may have offended some people, but we'll move on. She had to get re-education training, what for the mind, to say the correct thing. I could not believe that. But I feel, though, things are turning round again and people are seeing it for what it was, and that was just utter nonsense and madness.
But it's still happening at work. If you can't speak freely about important true things that you have to state in order to protect your own rights. Like, women need to be able to say who is a man in order that they can say those people can't come into women's spaces. So this is not optional. We don't have the choice of just staying quiet at work. By doing so, we lose our own rights. If you cannot do that at work, you do not have rights. And I think that people in this country cannot do it at work safely. I've heard repeated stories from people as I've travelled around, extraordinary stories. One woman told me that she was disciplined at work for misgendering a corpse. So,
Oh,
that can
okay.
hardly have offended him. Yeah. We were there in the UK 7 or 8 years ago. You literally couldn't say that you didn't think gender self ID was a good idea. I mean, my boss, Maya Forstater, who founded the charity I work for, Sex Matters, she literally lost her job for saying that the UK government should not introduce legal gender self ID. You're in that place now. We've come out of it by a lot of hard work and by some very carefully chosen legal test cases. I think you need to do the same.
It's not surprising human resources personnel absolutely love all of this ideology because in some respects, Helen, it gives them something to do, doesn't it? I mean, they've
It gives
bounced
them
on this
more
like
than
you would
more than
not
something to
believe.
do. It's power.
Yeah,
This
that's
wouldn't
right.
go as far as it did if it
That's
didn't
right.
give a lot of people
Every person who
power.
works in
It
HR, as
really is
far
that
as like,
simple.
yeah, they're nutty. Everybody who I've met who works in human resources is on a power trip, and this gives them something else that they can do. And as far as I'm concerned, it's dangerous, isn't it? Now I've got to ask, as we touched briefly on pronouns, what goes through your mind when you see pronouns on someone else's signature?
I don't want to assume too much about them because a lot of people don't really understand that what they're doing is making a faith declaration. But you are, if you're putting pronouns somewhere, what you're saying is that whether people are men or women is something different than just the observable fact of their sex, that it's something that they need to tell you. And if somebody who's clearly a man tells you that he's she, her, you're meant to understand that he's a woman. So that's a declaration of a bizarre neo-religion as far as I'm concerned, but I don't think everybody understands that. A lot of people just do it because it's a thing that you do now. Like a woman I was talking to here said that she was out of work for a couple of years. She was at retirement, but she was asked to come back and do some work for an organization she had worked for decades, and everyone had pronouns in their email signatures. So she asked one of the colleagues, like, what's this all about? And the colleague said to her, oh, just everyone's doing that now. I don't really know. So I wouldn't read too much into it. If someone makes a big deal of it, I do tend to think that they're, somewhat indoctrinated. But yeah, people just do what they do at work because that's what you're meant to do.
Well, yeah, that's true. Speaking of work issues and media, I want to get your thoughts on this. A news outlet, its prominence in New Zealand, I think it was about 2021, wrote this as a headline. I want to get your reaction to this. This is a serious headline, by the way, not all pregnant people are mothers or women. What do you make of that? This is a news website that's being.
I've seen hundreds and hundreds of things like that, including in serious academic journals. This is a neo-religion within which whether you are male or female is simply up to you. It's nothing to do with your body. Now, of course, we do come in two sexes, and only the female people can get pregnant, the women, and then we call them mothers when they have the baby. But that's not how they're using the words. They're using these words for people of either sex who want to use them. That's what they're saying. I mean, it's completely out of touch with reality, and it makes the words mother, female, all those sexed words, it makes them meaningless. But that, nevertheless, is what they are doing. And so anyone who says this has just fallen for this neo-religion.
I know One News here did a story recently and referred to those who get pregnant as pregnant people.
Yeah, it's very dehumanizing, isn't it? Women are a bundle of things. Like we're humans, just as human as men are. And the things that we do that are different from men, menstruation, getting pregnant, going through menopause, all of those things, they come as a package. And when we say woman, we aren't focusing in on women's excretions and bodily functions. And I like it that way, thank you. So if we list all these functions, like we're dehumanizing women, we're talking about us as if we're like milch cows or something. We don't do this to men. We don't call you ejaculating people or prostate havers. We only do it to women. And that's very interesting, isn't it?
Well, it is. I don't think I'll be referring to myself as an ejaculating human anytime soon. But anyway, you've talked about, and this is so true, you've talked about how this movement forces people into silence by weaponizing labels. I mean, I was branded a transphobe for calling out a man who raped a woman in the United States and then demanded to be sent to a woman's prison. And in fact, the person who attacked me identifies as they, them. Of course they do. They've been caught lying out repeatedly in mainstream media, yet was still awarded the Young New Zealander of the Year title, which I thought was kind of weird. They did get some backlash over that. They've also caused, you probably know who I'm thinking about, they've caused A lot of damage, I think, to many people in the gay community by whipping up a frenzy and an unnecessary storm and outright lying several times in mainstream media. But it almost feels like, once again, as we talked about this at the top of the program, there are too many people scared to speak out. In fact, the person who did speak out happened to be transgender themselves on the West Coast and thought this man was an absolute fool for creating so much disharmony among the gay community. I mean, it's weaponizing, isn't it? You're a transphobe if you say
Yes.
something that you happen to think differently about.
It's terrible. Throwing around these labels makes these labels meaningless. I mean, if a woman is a transphobe for saying that men can't be women, and in particular that men shouldn't be in women's spaces, services, or sports, then, most women are transphobes. Most people are. But, that's on them, not me. I'm not going to change my beliefs. If they want to say that those beliefs, which are necessary for me to speak the truth and for me to protect my human rights and the human rights of all women, that's on them. They can call me that all they like. I don't care. They've made the word meaningless.
Yeah. You're speaking at the Free Speech Union's annual conference here in Christchurch this coming weekend. What is the main concept or the main message that you're wanting to get across to New Zealanders based on your experience around the world?
So my thesis is that what you've got to do is you've got to protect speech at work first, before you try to do anything else. It's a matter of historical record that totalitarian and authoritarian regimes start by threatening people's ability to earn a living. You step in line, or else you're kicked out of work, or your children are kicked out of work, or they can't go to school, that sort of thing. So if people cannot speak freely, and I do not mean ranting about any old thing, I mean saying necessary, true, polite things at work, then people will not do it. So that before everything else, you've got to protect that freedom of speech and belief at work. And then you're off to the races. Then you can start to think, what else has gone wrong? Is it the definition of sex in law? Is it gender medicine or whatever? Because now you can speak without fear of being indigent. That's how we did it in the UK. There's still lots to do, but we now do have established freedom of speech at work.
Well, may freedom of speech at work continues. In what form it's left, I don't know. Helen Joyce, it's nice to speak with you. Look forward to meeting you over the weekend. Enjoy your time in New Zealand.
Thank you very much for having me on.